I got some news for you. Shame is not your personality. It's not your personality, it's not my personality. But why do we make it such? Why does shame love a good identity crisis? You see, I think we form our personality a lot around shame. And let's talk about shame some more, shall we? And not the cute little, oh, I probably shouldn't have had that entire pizza kind of shame. No, I'm talking about the deep stuff, the more profound stuff. I am talking about the kind of shame that crawls into your head, takes off its shoes, puts its feet up on the coffee table, and starts acting like it owns the damn place. That's the kind of shame that I'm talking about. Where it says, hey, everybody, I'm shame. I'll be running your life from now on. And if you let it, it will. And see, we know this. Because shame has a nasty little trick. It takes something that you did and it convinces you that you, in fact, are that thing that you did. You see that? You hear that little subtlety there? You become the thing that you did wrong. It's no longer that you made a mistake, it's that you are a mistake, right? It no longer says that I did something terrible, it says you are a terrible person. You are the terrible decision. You know, and on and on and on. And we do this a lot in our own minds. Shame has that effect. It doesn't just say that you hurt somebody. It says you are the kind of person who hurts people. And that wrecks us. It's not that you screwed up, it's that you are a screw up. You are a mess up. You didn't mess up, you are a mess up. And I am a mess up. Well, congratulations. We've identified your whole personality. And that's where things get kind of, a little shaky, right? Because shame isn't satisfied with saying that behavior was unacceptable. No, it doesn't just leave it there. Shame wants to go all the way to, therefore, you are unacceptable, right? It wants to paint that entire picture. And those are very different things, very different messages. One creates responsibility, the other creates a prison, a cage. And we don't want to get caught up in that cage, do we? Welcome to the shame game, or the shame prison, right? I mean, that's what we're talking about here, because that's what shame ultimately does to us. It puts us in this cage, this prison. And imagine for a second that you do, in fact, have a cage around you, but there's no metal, there's no bars, there's no lock, there's no guards, there's no prison warden. It's just beliefs. And beliefs that sound like I'm damaged, I'm unworthy, I'm terrible, I'm the worst, and people can't really love me. I don't deserve love. And if people knew the real me, they'd leave. I don't deserve happiness, right? I don't deserve another chance. These are the kind of beliefs and thoughts that percolate, that permeate. I've already shown everybody who I am. See, that's a cage. That's a prison, you know? And here's the really messed up part about this is eventually you don't even need somebody else to lock the door, right? You do it yourself. And that's the damaging and damning thing about shame is we lock ourselves into our own prison by it. You become your own prison guard. You monitor yourself. You censor yourself. You punish yourself. You avoid intimacy. You avoid many things, many opportunities. You avoid being susceptible and vulnerable and open, right? You distance yourself. You detach from others. You avoid being seen. You avoid taking healthy risks. And essentially, you hide from living. And eventually, you may even start sabotaging good things because some little voice inside says, well, whoa, 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 whoa. People don't like us, don't get nice things. People like us don't get nice things, right? And it's not just an emotion anymore. It's become an operating system. This is something that permeates your entire being. And nobody asked you to install that damn software. But we get locked into this, don't we? It becomes sort of a feedback loop. It becomes almost a default network system. But we shouldn't allow shame to write our biographies. And here's something I need to make clear. You are not your worst action. You are not your worst decisions. You are not your worst day. You are not that bad relationship or your worst relationship. You are not your worst, most terrible mistake. And you are damn sure not your worst Tuesday. We all have bad days. We have bad moments. We have bad years. Because some of us have taken a terrible chapter out of our lives and decided, well, I guess this is the whole book. You know, we base our whole life off a bad chapter or two. And maybe it's a really bad chapter. It's really ugly. Bad shit happened. And maybe it's a chapter you wish you could set on fire and pretend it doesn't exist. But it's still a chapter, and here's where we have to be adults about all of this. You know, if you hurt somebody, you got to own it. I have to own it. I have to acknowledge it. If you screwed up, you know, account for it. Say it out loud. Own it. If you cross the boundary, own it. If you behave badly, own it. Don't turn accountability into a participation trophy for your ego. Don't sit around saying, I'm such a horrible person, right? While doing absolutely nothing to change it. You know? We say this stuff and then we don't do anything. And that's not really accountability. That's not being intentional with our actions. That's just shame wearing a fake mustache and pretending to be responsibility. And we don't need our shame to pretend to be anything else, do we? You know, responsibility asks, what did I do and what can I do differently? Shame asks, well, how can I make myself suffer enough to feel like I paid for it? You see, we do this a lot. We suffer ourselves into feeling better or to feeling like it's okay. And I don't think we should do that. You know, it's okay to not feel good about yourself after you've done something wrong or after you've made a mistake or after you've hurt or harmed somebody. I mean, I think that's important. And, you know, sometimes we get so caught up in trying to eliminate shame that we accidentally eliminate our conscience in the process. And that's not what we're talking about here. I mean, if you hurt somebody and you genuinely hurt them and you feel bad about it, that's a damn good thing. And you should. Really, you should feel that. I should feel that. Seriously. That feeling may be telling you something that, you know, maybe you violated your own values, somebody else's values, that maybe you really did harm somebody, that maybe you did something you're not proud of. And, you know, you don't have to immediately slap a positive affirmation on it, right? We don't need to put language around this and try to make ourselves feel better immediately. You don't have to look in the mirror and say, I am perfect exactly as the way I am. No, probably not, right? And, you know, maybe you screwed up. Maybe you need to do some work. It's okay. And it's going to be okay. And that's okay. And it's okay to say, you know, I don't like what I did. And it's okay to say, I regret that, right? I mean, I don't think any of us live life and don't have some regrets. And I think it's okay to say, I hurt somebody. I did something that I'm not proud of, right? And it's also okay that to say that I need to make this right. And that's called having a conscience. That's called being human. And those are good things to have, those voices in ourselves after we've done something, to say those kinds of things to ourselves. The goal isn't to become so emotionally enlightened that nothing bothers you. That's not enlightenment. That's a personality malfunction. We ought to feel things. And if you don't feel something when you upset somebody, there might be something a little bit wrong, right? So let's talk a little bit about what the differences are between guilt and shame. And these are important distinctions to make, right? We talked about this in the last video, but I want to just rehash it. Guilt says I did something that I don't like. Shame says there is something fundamentally at bottom wrong with me. I am rotten to the core. Guilt can motivate you toward repair. Shame can motivate you towards hiding. And many of us, myself included, hide when it comes to shame. Guilt can make us feel like and say to ourselves, I need to apologize. And shame says, don't talk to anybody. They'll find out who you really are. And then they'll never forgive you, right? Or they'll never see past that. Guilt can say, I need to make a change. Shame says, well, why bother? You're always going to be this way. Shame keeps us trapped. It keeps us running around in that circular prison of self, right? And do you see the difference? One points towards our behaviors and actions, and the other attacks our whole entire identity. We base our personality and identity around shame if we allow that. And this is why shame is so damn destructive. Because once shame gets embedded into our identity, every mistake becomes evidence, right? It becomes validation, and not the good kind. You don't just make a mistake, right? You think, oh, there it is. There's proof. I already knew it, but there's the evidence and there's a proof that, I'm wrong. Something's wrong with me. You don't just get to have a bad day. You say, see, I'm broken. You don't just get rejected. You say to yourself, of course, who would want me? Who would need me? Who would value me? Shame becomes a prosecutor with unlimited billable hours, right? And apparently this prosecutor never takes a vacation. That's that ongoing loop in our mind. Shame replays all this stuff to us, right? And the unconscious, right? Let's throw that on the table. And let's take this a step deeper. Because some of the shame we carry isn't sitting neatly on the surface. No. It's down in the basement. And this is where the unconscious resides. And psychologically speaking, human beings have a remarkable ability to shove uncomfortable things downstairs into the basement and then act surprised when we hear banging and commotion down in the basement. We say, what's that noise? Oh, nothing. We act like it's nothing anyway. And it's probably just some unresolved psychological material. No, nothing to see here. Carry on. And we all have parts of ourselves we don't particularly like, right? There's these parts that we're embarrassed by, that we don't feel quite like we can share those maybe with the world or with others, or heck, even with ourselves. Parts that we don't understand, parts that contradict the person we believe we are, or that we believe we want to be. And sometimes we become so committed to being good that we become terrified of discovering anything in ourselves that isn't good. It's like shocking. And it can become completely deflating and demoralizing. So we hide it. We suppress it. We deny it. We do everything we can to get it out of our realm of consciousness. We exile it, right? We push it off. But see, here's the problem. What you bury doesn't disappear. It shows up sideways, right? It comes back. It has a way of seeping through. It comes through your relationships, your reactions, your compulsions, your edginess, defensiveness, your distractedness, your maybe you have an issue with self-sabotage, your need to control, your inability to tolerate criticism, you know, in your fear of being seen, of being observed and witnessed, you know, in your ability to tolerate your own mistakes. The unconscious has a funny way of sending you the bill. And you're going, where did this come from? Why, what's going on here? So, naturally, no shocker here, it's time to bring things to the light. And this is why awareness is so powerful. You can't transform what you're unwilling to see. You can't work with a part of yourself that you've decided is forbidden from existing. And this is very important. And this is where some of the newer therapeutic conversations around no bad parts can be incredibly useful, right? Now, let's be clear as this plane is going over my head. No bad parts doesn't mean everything you've ever done is fine and it's well and good. No, 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 absolutely not. If you hurt somebody, that matters. If you violate somebody's boundaries, that matters. It's not a get out of jail free card. I mean, if you betray somebody's trust, that matters. That should be looked at. That should not be glossed over. If you behave destructively, that matters. No bad parts, you know, doesn't mean no accountability. It means you're willing to understand the whole system, right? You're willing and able and ready to look at everything. Because a healthy person isn't necessarily someone who has eliminated every uncomfortable part of themselves. No, a healthy, integrated person is somebody who can, you know, integrate. And they're willing to look at those parts and take an honest, hard look at those. And they can say, you know, there's a part of me that's selfish. There's an insecure part of me. There's an anxious part of me. There's a part of me that's angry, that's full of rage, that's hurt. You know, there's a scared part of me. There's a part of me that wants approval, that needs approval, that relies on it. There's a part of me that wants control. I need to be in control. I need to feel control. And, you know, there's a part of me that has made some really questionable decisions, you know, really went on the edge. And instead of saying, you know, all of those things are not me, you know, you can say, okay, let's look at it. And see, this is what healthy integrated people do is they look at themselves. They ask themselves the hard questions. This isn't about worshiping self. This isn't about acting as if you're perfect or have your stuff together all the time. You know, it just means like you don't have to let every part of yourself drive the damn car of your big capital S self, right? You got to know who's sitting in the back seat of the car of the capital S self. And this is where shame becomes problematic because it loves a disintegrated being, a disintegrated self. You know, it says, you know, there are good parts and there are bad parts, and I'm going to focus on the bad ones, right? But not just focus on them, I'm going to hide them. Let's put out the good stuff, let's put that out in front, and let's pretend like the bad stuff doesn't exist, you know, and more so, let's not let everybody else see them. But see, the thing about healing and integration is It says, I want to take a look at all of this. I want to get into it. Because when you can acknowledge something without immediately collapsing into self-loathing, you gain options. You gain freedom, right? It sets you free. And these options themselves are freedom. You can say to yourself, I have this tendency without saying, I am these tendencies. You can say, I did this, right? And you can say that without saying, this is all of who I am, right? I'm more than that. I'm more than these bad choices. And, you can say things like, I hurt somebody without saying, therefore, I am incapable of love. And the list goes on and on and on, you know? And one of my favorites is you can say that you have some work to do without saying, I am permanently defective, right? I am permanently F. And that's the difference. That's the difference between awareness and identity fusion, right? We don't want to become fused to our shame. It's important to look at it, to take an honest, hard look at it, but we don't need to fuse it to our whole self, our whole personality. And chronic shame can turn into something that resembles what we'll call an emotional cancer, right? And I'm just using this as a metaphor. I'm not saying that shame is literally cancer. I'm saying untreated shame can behave like something very corrosive. It eats away at us. It eats away at our sense of wellness, our sense of well-being. It can eat away at our sense of joy, our sense of connection, because we're hiding and we distance and we isolate ourselves. It can eat away at our desire for intimacy. It can chip away and eat away at our confidence, our curiosity, our sense of wonder. It eats away at your willingness to participate in your own life, essentially. You almost become the walking dead in a sense. You know? Like, if you're not connecting, if you're not getting close, if you're not sharing and you're not open, are you really living? And that's one of the most damaging properties of shame, right? Because you're always thinking, okay, what are these people going to think of me? Right? And do they notice me? And do they see me beyond like what I did? Right? And shame can become so destructive, it has you asking questions that are kind of silly in nature, right? Because we all make mistakes. And we don't want to be seen maybe right away, but I think it's important at some point on the healing side of things to come around to acknowledging those, but also learning how to live with those. You don't need to hide all the time. I don't need to hide all the time. Life goes on, as it turns out, right? That's the only option here. Life goes on, so you may as well integrate and say, you know what, I don't want to be that way anymore. I don't want to be that person, and I certainly don't want to hide behind my shame anymore because it's not doing me any favors, right? And this whole idea that, if you prove you're suffering long enough, that proves that you care, that you cared enough about what you did. And I think that can be really dangerous, right? Because we don't need to show how bad we feel through suffering long enough. Some people overstay their welcome when it comes to suffering. And I'm not saying you shouldn't feel some amount of guilt and a skosh of shame, maybe. But I also don't think we need to become trapped in our past. I don't think we need to become trapped in the things that we did because we are bigger than our worst Tuesdays. We are more than our worst days. You know, and if we can repair, and if we have any hope of repairing, then we need to go, okay, yes, I did all those things. Yes, I acknowledge it. Yes, I take accountability and responsibility for it. But that is not all of me. And people that love me, that care about me, that want to connect with me can see beyond that. They can have that transcendent vision, right? That's who we want to surround ourselves with. And hopefully we have people like that in our lives that can help us feel that way and help us reconnect and integrate back to our whole self. But that requires many things. And, not everybody is on that wavelength, right? Let's be a realist here about it for half a second. Not everybody that you come across is going to be able to see that or have that transcendent, larger vision or version, that picture of you that you want them to have, at least initially anyway. I don't want to say that there's no hope for them ever having that, but some people, for various reasons, aren't able to see you as more than your worst Tuesday, right? So, yeah, it's not easy, but I'm coming around to the idea personally that I'm not the worst things that I've done. And this is something that I'm wrestling with. And I think it's just something we constantly learn to wrestle with, right? Once you remove some of the barriers to shame and you kind of you start breaking through those bars of beliefs that you have about yourself, then I think it helps you take a deeper, more profound look at yourself and go, you know what? Like, I can't necessarily change what I did, but I can change how I live, right? I can change how I live moving forward. And since yesterday is gone and tomorrow is unfolding and the present is unfolding, I think we really have to go, all right, this is how I'm going to live. This is how I'm going to go about things. And I won't BS you. This is hard. This is really hard. This is some of the hardest work I've ever done. And I feel as if I'm a novice talking to y'all about this because I am in the throes of this currently myself. And I don't think the work is ever done with this because shame is such a slippery thing, and it can kind of seep its its claws into you, I guess. And it can be subtle, right? It doesn't have to knock you upside the head. I think the claws of shame are gentle. You don't even really realize it's shame sometimes. See, it disguises itself and it shows up in different ways at different times, you know, and it really can keep you from living your life, I guess is my point. And do you want to really hide? Do you really not want to live a full life? Do you not want to get your voice out there if you feel compelled to do that? Do you think like you don't get to go on living after your worst moment or worst experience? I mean, does life stop when you experience an F up of all F ups? I mean, I don't think so. But well, not only do I not think so, I know that that's not reality, right? Like, if life stopped after each of us made a huge mistake, then many of us would probably not live very long, right? Life, we wouldn't carry on. We wouldn't move forward. And to break through the doors of shame, or that I should say the walls of shame, and to climb over those walls, I think we have to shine a light on it. We have to bring awareness to it. It's a constant, everyday thing. I think it's a conversation we have with ourselves. But I also think it's important when you find people, or if you have people already, that hopefully you can say, hey, I want to talk to you about this. I want to bounce this off of you. I want to, share this with you. And if you don't have anybody close to you, maybe a coach, a therapist, somebody of that ilk. But I think it's important to get it out there, to talk about it, and to just lay it out there in a very raw way, a very real way. Because it's important for us to hear ourselves talk about those experiences. And the more I think we do that, the more that, the weight of shame lifts. And again, it doesn't mean that the things that we did, said, or done, like, we're completely absolved of those, or that, like, those don't count, or those, they don't matter at all, or, you know, that it excuses it or anything like that. It just means that, you know, we can move forward. We can move through it. We don't have to hide anymore. We don't have to run away. We don't have to negate ourselves anymore of the opportunities in life, of the opportunities to live and laugh and enjoy life and bring our light to life, right? Because shame really dims our light, right? It takes away our light. It sucks it away. It drains us. And we begin telling ourselves we are not worthy of stuff anymore. Like, we don't deserve love or acceptance or forgiveness or a whole myriad of things that we all, in my book anyway, we all deserve. We all get, no matter what you've done or said or did. And that includes even if you've harmed people. I'm not saying it's okay to hurt people, to harm people, obviously. But oftentimes the biggest weight of shame comes from hurting or harming others. And, you know, we use that as fodder and gasoline that we pour on ourselves, and we give ourselves a match and we light ourselves on fire and we say, hey, see, I told you I was flammable. I told you I was combustible. And, you know, we've really got to work on this. So I will wrap it up there for now, and I may come back to shame in the future because I think it's such a important topic and an important area to talk about, because I feel like everybody that I come across on myriad levels to varying degrees, on a wide spectrum, you know, we all experience shame in some sort of way, as far as I can tell. And I think to live a good life and to live a healthy life and to step in and then to rise into your full potential, your full capacities, and your ability to transcend requires you to look at your stuff, look at those parts, look at that shame, and then to do the work, to take responsibility, to take action, to actually change yourself. And some of that requires professional work. Some of that requires, you know, weekly meetings with close confidants and friends and mentors, whoever it might be. It doesn't really matter, but we need people. But we also need the ability to, in those quiet moments with ourselves, to look at our stuff and say, you know, I don't want to be that person anymore. I don't want to live that way. You know, that's not me. I'm better than that. I'm bigger than that. I want more in my life. I want to be a better person. I want to be kinder. I want to be more empathetic. All of those things. So don't kill yourself over shame anymore, and don't lock yourself in that prison. It's time to come out. Time to be free. And it's time to live. This is Sacred Fox Consulting. I'll see you again. Hi, you've been watching Sacred Fox Consulting, and I'm Mr. Fox. If you like what you heard, feel free to please subscribe, and I hope to see you next time. Take care and be well.